Welcome to another episode of Top 1% Recruiting. I'm Alex Rojas, your talent advisor. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how the Generation Xers are ruling recruiting. That's right. They're modernizing the workforce. This is a world that's fast-paced when it comes to technology. The technology reigns supreme right now, but it's one generation that stands out above the rest that is leading the charge and changing the trends and the norms of how we're conducting business. That's right. You may think that it's the Millennials, and those are the Generation Y and Zers. You may think that they're the ones that are grabbing all the attention with all their digital prowess and their youthful energy, but it's the seasoned and the timeless work ethic of the Generation Xers that has been shaping our economy and the trajectory of where we're going to. And specifically within talent acquisition, that landscape is ever evolving and changing. So join me on this episode as we explore why not only are the Generation Xers keeping up with their time, but they're leading the charge and modernizing the workforce. So listen up, if you're a Generation Y or Zer, you're going to want to stick around to the end of this episode. Okay, so before we dive into this episode, I need to set the framework up and how we're going to have this discussion. So we're going to talk about the Generation X, Y, and Zers and what their character traits are like, what their persona profiles are. But we're also going to look at these 5 key areas. So we're going to look at how they interact, how they engage, and what their traits are when it comes to technology, work ethic, learning, teamwork, and leadership. So before we dive into that, let's look at the characteristic traits of each one of these generations. Now, we also have to look at this and realize that the baby boomers are exiting the workforce right now. So they are either in the process of exiting, have already done so, and so there's going to be a transfer of generational wealth coming into the Gen Xers. So when we think about the Gen Xers, that is somebody who was born between 1965 and 1980. And so what they really experienced was really an economic uncertainty. There was a rapid surge in technology, and there was also social and dramatic global world change happening right in front of their eyes. Now, the Generation Y group, they were born from the 1981 to the 1996 era. So for them, they really experienced the digital revolution. They actually got to experience a real unique sense of globalization and interconnectivity as well. So they are the tech savvy ones, right? They're the ones that have grown up with technology, but they also have really desired a work-life integration, and they're really embrace the spirit of diversity as well, as far as that generation goes. And then finally, the Generation Zers, they were born in 1997 through 2012. So they grew up entirely in the digital age. So they don't know anything different. I mean, technology comes second nature to them, where for us Generation Xers, it might be a little bit more of a challenge from time to time. But they also embody an entrepreneurial spirit that is very infectious, and they value practicality. So sometimes what that means is they're losing a little sense of history along the way. So now that we've set this framework here, we have an idea here as far as these characteristic traits of each one of these generations. Now let's go ahead and dive into these focused areas and how each one of them is unique and different on their own. So the first area that we're going to look at is technology. So again, we're going to look at each generation and how they've come to experience technology. So when we look at Generation Xers, I mean, this is a very big contrast and difference, right? Generation Xers have had to learn how to adapt to technology. I mean, I was just telling my kids the other day, the idea, the concept that I used to have to write a letter, drop it in the mail, wait 2 or 3 days for it to be delivered, for somebody to open up the letter, write a letter back to me and send it back. And within 1 week's turnaround time, we were able to send and retrieve a letter to each other, where today it's an instant text messaging that goes out, so, or a snap. So we have learned, Generation Xers have learned how to leverage technology and tools, but more importantly, they've learned how to apply them to business. And that is a very big distinction there. So Generation Y, so these are the millennials now, Generation Yers, they really heavily rely on technology. And I think whenever that happens, what tends to be the outcome is that it brings some gaps when it comes to face-to-face communications. So a lot of times what we're seeing in the workforce is a little bit of a challenge when it comes to interpersonal skills because there's such a dependency on technology as far as their main form of communication. Now, also, they're experiencing an influx of information that they're trying to process. And so what happens with that is there tends to be a level of distraction and limited focus when it comes to applying business skills in the business world. And then finally, Generation Z. So for them, I mean, they're fluent in technology. I mean, technology is at their fingertips. I mean, it's probably embedded in their brains at this point. But, for them, their biggest challenge is going to be discerning credible information when it comes to what's real online and what isn't. Their value of resources and what they go ahead and determine what is real or credible, it can be a little bit skeptical. And so they're also going to be overwhelmed by the rapid rollout of technology. I mean, you have all of these different versions of apps that come out on a consistent basis. And they're also going to be experiencing this digital addiction frenzy that's going on right now, the constant need to have their phone, to have electronics, to have gadgets, at their fingertips. And then ultimately, what we're talking about, what we're seeing in here is that there is an unhealthy balance when it comes to having experiences that are online versus offline. And so a lot of times Generation Xers can see this clearly. Like, we're baffled a lot of times at the millennials that they don't even go outside. They don't know how it is. A lot of them don't know how it is to go outside and experience the real world, whether they're young, teenagers, whatever it might be. So the technology has really had a strong influence on these three generations, but you can clearly see the distinct differences between them. So as we continue to uncover these 5 focused areas, the intent here is to show you what kind of impact and the difference that these generations are having within talent acquisition. So when we look at the work ethic and we look at the Generation Xers, they were clearly raised by the baby boomers. And so if you're raised by a baby boomer, I think hard work is instilled in you. It's ingrained in you. It's part of your DNA because of that. I mean, the baby boomers were raised by the greatest generation. So we were also taught, generations were also taught that you had to go make money, earn money in order to get the things that you want in life. And so there's a very clear distinction here that Generation Xers actually value good work ethic. And even more importantly than that, they actually are encouraged and inspired to have accountability and fellowship. So that's a big difference there when we look at work ethic as we cover the next group, which is the Generation Y. So these are the millennials, Y and Z. So Generation Yers now, so the Y group, they really, for them, I think they value that more of that work-life balance. And you see a lot of that. They really, really want to go ahead. I think work-life balance actually probably was invented by them. So what they want is they want to be able to work for a purpose. They really want to work and have meaningful results, which, hey, you can't knock that, right? But what that means, though, is there's a lack of dedication or commitment if they're not serving their purpose and they're not finding meaning behind the work that they're doing. And so Generation Z, if we look at the Generation Zers right here, they are also purpose-driven. So they really want fulfillment, but more importantly, and this is a clear distinction, they want flexibility. They want to be able to freelance. Again, they have that entrepreneurial spirit. When it comes to values and ethics, they really want to go ahead and make sure that companies have social responsibility when it comes to that. So some may say that they work hard sometimes, but maybe not work smart. And a lot of times this can be construed as that they are being self-seeking in their ambitions. And so what happens is through that, the lack of hard work that's instilled in them, there's a disconnect even between the Generation X and the Yers with the Zers because they don't see that certain level of discipline. So we can see here 3 different groups, 3 different ways that they're raised, 3 different experiences, and the impact that they're making within talent acquisition when it comes to work ethic. So let's go ahead and get into how these 3 generations actually learn, the learning aspect of it. This is going to fall under training, development, and growth opportunities that each one of these generations have. And so when we look at the Generation Xers, for the most part, they're going to be self-motivated and self-directed. So they're going to embrace technology. They've embraced technology as it has evolved to really grasp how to learn. They're very big time readers. They still are kind of considered old schoolers because they love to still read books. But they're going to invest in their professional growth and development and training. So they still value the importance of education, where a lot of the newer generations aren't really valuing education as a whole. But here's the key thing is that Generation Xers are actually flexible in how they learn. And that is an important factor, is the flexibility behind that. So when we look at the Generation Y group, they're going to embrace technology and any kind of interactive platforms that are out there. So they're going to be easily influenced to have technology at their fingertips to kind of learn. So when they look at in-person instruction, they might get a little bored from that. So they're going to also be one of the groups here that probably values feedback. They want to know consistently, how are they doing? They want validation in what they're learning. And as they're applying things, give me validation. I need validation because that determines or not for me whether I know I'm doing an acceptable job. I'm performing at the way that you want me to perform. So that's a very big distinction there. And then finally, the Generation Zers. So the Generation Z, they're highly comfortable with the digital learning platforms that are out there. For them, it's really more about quick and rapid ways to kind of learn. They're also against kind of these long lecture type of formats. They really want practical, roll up your sleeve, hands-on type of learning. That's the kind of experiences that they're looking for. So for them, things like boot camps or online webinars and courses, that's going to make a big distinction, but they have to be short and condensed. If they're long formats, you start losing them. So you can see the 3 different ways that these generations actually adapt to technology when it comes to learning, and what are their strengths and what are their shortfalls when it comes to learning. Okay, so let's get into this even a little bit more. So now we're going to uncover some of the business aspects. And so we really want to focus on teamwork and the 3 distinct differences between these 3 generations and what kind of experiences and contributions they bring and how they even see teamwork as a whole. So this affects, the business world and especially within talent acquisition. So if you're looking at the Generation Xers, they really do value collaboration when it comes to teamwork. And more importantly, building cohesive teams and kind of creating these sort of inclusive environments, that's a big deal for a lot of Generation Xers. And so they want to make sure that as they build these teams, that teammates, that everyone around them is feeling welcome, that they're feeling valued and supported, that their opinion counts and matters. Now, when we look at the Generation Y group, they're going to value collaboration, but where they might struggle just a little bit is going to be when it comes to kind of the diverse perspectives and when it comes to conflicts that might arise. So they're not going to be, as formidable when it comes to dealing with conflict resolution. And so what that does is that they kind of go out and they venture a little bit outside of that team. And a lot of times, the Generation Y, the millennials here, they're seeking individual recognition, which probably goes to the fact that, everybody got a trophy in this generation versus the Generation X, you had to go earn that trophy. And so then when we look at the Generation Zers here, so they grew up in a very highly connected society, right? So, they were they've grown up to really be connected to people all around them. And so one of the things that they're going to be facing that's a big challenge for them is the collaboration within the workforce environment. And the reason why is because there's sort of a struggle, there's a gap or a challenge when it comes to building rapport with others who have different ideologies, different opinions, different backgrounds that aren't similar to them. So they're going to be very opinionated. And what that's going to do is it's going to make them, again, also kind of like the Generation Y, it's going to make them divert a little bit to want to go ahead and work more individually and independently on their own, which really for them, it really heightens their creativity senses as well. So you can see, again, the different dynamics that are unfolding here when you look at the X, Y, and Zers and the contributions that they're making in corporate America and the business world when it comes to teamwork. Okay, so here we are, the fifth and final area that we want to focus in on when it comes to the impacts and the influences that these three generations have, not only in the modernized workforce, but within talent acquisition. So this is an important one. These are the leadership characteristic traits. So when we look at Generation X, what do they have to offer? They offer really a unique blend of really experiences and expertise. So they also bring innovation. So one of the things that Generation X is known for is they love to lead by example, and they set the bar high. And that's really kind of the essence of top 1% recruiting, is that they're striving for this level of greatness. And maybe we get it from the Michael Jordan era or the Dream Team era, whatever it might be. But they're also seeking mentorship. So not only are they seeking mentors, but they're also looking for peer mentors, and they really enjoy the opportunity to mentor other people as well. So that really defines, is very unique as far as defining their character traits when it comes to leadership. Now, Generation Y, so what they do is, they're kind of challenged here because unfortunately, they've been afflicted with the stereotype of being entitled or being impatient and bratty, right? And so this really kind of hinders their ability to kind of lead in a natural context. So one of the things that they are also limited in is their lack of experience. And so with that lack of experience, they kind of struggle at times when it comes to confidence. And when you put them in a corporate structure and an environment where there's job titles, roles, and levels in organization structure and hierarchies, they're going to be a little bit more challenged when it comes to adapting to kind of these confined and restricted sort of boxes that they think that they're presented in. And then when we look at Generation Z, so, for them, they've only been in the workforce for a little over, than a handful of years, right? So for them, they're also going to lack experience, but they really haven't quite gotten to that place where they're developed their skills. So for them, I think the biggest thing that they're experiencing right now in this generation of dealing with the workforce is, are they turning to reliable role models? And a lot of times that's questioned because, you can see some of their role models and mentors that are out there, and it's going to be the Kardashians or Mr. Beast, and each one of them are successful in their own. And I think what they're doing is they're just trying to figure out different ways to grow professionally and adapt this sort of leadership style that's going to be a lot different than it was for the Generation Xers. So, but ultimately, leadership qualities and styles are going to be different and unique between these three. So as we bring this thing full circle and come to a closing on this episode, we originally set out to build a case to demonstrate that Generation X rules recruiting, and more importantly, that they have a strong influence within talent acquisition, and rightly so. They are the leading generation of our time. Now, with every generation, there are strengths and limitations in all generations. And the passing of the baton, the passing of the mantle is going to happen over the next 10 years, 15 years. And so Generation Xers, they're going to be exiting the workforce. And it's going to be the Millennials, the Y and the Zers, that are going to be taking over. Does that sound a little scary or what? But they're going to be the new generation wealth builders. They're going to be the ones that are going to be creating new ways of conducting business and defining success. So now more than ever, we, the Generation Xers, we have to figure out a way how to mentor this new generation without hurting their feelings, because that's the knock that they get. And the Millennials, the Ys and the Zers, they're going to have to learn how to trust the Generation Xers, and they're going to have to be okay for it, because they accept that there's a level of a reputation that the Generation Xers have, and we are the original OG. And the reason why Generation Xers are the originators, because we are the originators of rap, of hip hop, of pop culture. I mean, we were instrumental and pioneers when it came to digital devices, everything from the iPhones to gaming systems. When it came to extreme fashion trends, team dynasties were pretty dynamic. Leaders that were not only recognized in your local communities, but on a national and a global scale. And what about working from home, telecommuting? That was something that Generation Xers brought into the workforce. I can remember a time when I was in college looking at a magazine and seeing the idea and the concept that the modern workforce could come to a point where you didn't have to go into the office. And I set eyes and made a commitment that I wanted to have that type of lifestyle. And for the last nearly 30 years, that's what I've been doing. I think I've worked in an office environment for about maybe 3 years of those 30 years. And that was early on when I started my career. Anything is possible as long as we do it in the spirit of new generation transformation that takes place. Remember, top 1%ers, we always level up.